Kartals, please mention. Thank you so much. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Gopijana Vallabha Girivaradhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Jana Ranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Om Vishnupad, Paramahamsa Parivrajacharya, Shota Shota Shri Srimad His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki, ISKCON GBC BBD Founder Srila Prabhupada Ki, Granth Srimad Bhagavatam Ki, Shri Shri Gaurnitai Ki, Shri Shri Jagnabal Subhadramai Ki, Shri Yashoda Damodar Radha Damodar Ki, Srila Prabhupada Tirubhav Mahotsav Ki, Nittai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to some devotees. All glories to Lord Sweet Shri Guru and Shri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Vishtai Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyamadi Paschat Deshatarine. Is there a verse, Mataji? Is there a verse? Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Udiraye Nashtapraeshu Bhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtaki. Okay. It's a pleasure to be back here in Switzerland. Hare Krishna. Okay, so we won't repeat because the verse is not on the board, so I'll just read the verse. It's also irregular in terms of the meter. Navasvapi varsheshu bhagavan narayano mahapurusha purushanam tad anugrahayatma tattva vyuhenatmanadhyapi sannidhiyate. Translation. To show mercy to his devotees in each of these 9 tracts of land, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, known as Narayan, expands himself in his quadruple principles of Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. In this way, he remains near his devotees to accept their service. Purport. In this connection, Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur informs us that the demigods worship the Supreme Lord in his various deity forms, Archa Vigraha, because except in the spiritual world, the Supreme Personality of Godhead cannot be directly worshipped in person. In the material world, the Lord is always worshipped as the Archa Vigraha, or deity in the temple. There is no difference between the Archa Vigraha and the original person, and therefore those who are engaged in worshipping the deity in the temple in full opulence, even on this planet, should be understood to be directly in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead without a doubt. As enjoined in the Shastras, Archa Vishnu Shiladhir Gurushu Naramati, no one should treat the deity in the temple as stone or metal, nor should one think that the spiritual master is an ordinary human being. One should strictly follow this Shastric injunction and worship the deity, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, without offences. The spiritual master is a direct representative of the Lord, and no one should consider him an ordinary human being. By avoiding offences against the deity and the spiritual master, one can advance in spiritual life or Krishna consciousness. In this regard, the following quotation appears in the Laghu Bhagavatamrita, and I will just read the translation for speed because we want to speak a little about Prabhupada today. In the Padma Purana, it is said that in the spiritual world, the Lord personally expands in all directions and is worshipped as Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha. The same God is represented by the deity in this material world, which is only 1/4 of his creation. Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, and Aniruddha are also present in the 4 directions of this material world. There is a Vaikuntha Loka covered with water in this material world, and on that planet is a place called Vedavati, where Vasudev is located. Another planet known as Vishnu Loka is situated above Satyaloka, and there Sankarshan is present. Similarly, in Dwarkapuri, Pradyumna is the predominator. On the island known as Svetadweep, there is an ocean of milk, and in the midst of that ocean is a place called Airavati-puri, where Aniruddha lies on Ananta. In some of the Satvata Tantras, there is a description of the 9 Varshas and the predominating deity worshipped in each: Vasudev, Sankarshan, Pradyumna, Aniruddha, Narayan, Nrsimha, Hayagriva, Mahavaraha, and Brahma. The Lord Brahma mentioned in this connection is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. When there is no fit human being to empower as Lord Brahma, the Lord himself takes the position of Lord Brahma. Tatra Brahma tu Vigyaya Purvokta Vidyaya Hari. That Brahma mentioned here is Hari himself. Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Mukam Karoti Bachalam Pangum Langaite Girim Yat Kripa Tamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Caitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. So today is the Tirubhav, the disappearance day of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. It's a sad day. because we reflect on what we've received from Srila Prabhupada. We reflect on his countless sacrifices, on his mission, and we feel so bereft of his association. None of us in this room ever met Srila Prabhupada in person. And although, of course, Vani, we often emphasize the Vani and say how through Srila Prabhupada's books, number one, and his lectures, his personal example, various instructions through letters and so on, we can connect with his divine grace. At the same time, there's no replacement for Vapu. There's no replacement for the actual physical form of a person and having directly coming in touch with that person with our senses. That the physical presence, when you hear the disciples of Srila Prabhupada speak about Srila Prabhupada, especially those who spent time with him, extensive time with him, it's magical, it's so absorbing. And you can get some taste, some experience, a drop of the experience that they had through their words. Srila Prabhupada gave us his wonderful books. And as we see in this purport, what Srila Prabhupada is always doing, ultimately, what did Prabhupada want to give? Okay, so understanding Srila Prabhupada. Any person is very complex, is multifaceted, has so many different elements to their character, to their person. So Srila Prabhupada, that's any person, and then we're talking about a transcendentalist like Srila Prabhupada. So who can really understand Srila Prabhupada? Srila Prabhupada was an ocean of mercy. He was so kind. He was so loving. At the same time, he could also be very strong. So they say that a Vaishnav is as strong as a thunderbolt and as soft as a rose. Both. And they seem like contradictory characteristics. But they're both present in the person of Srila Prabhupada. And there's not a contradiction. So, for example, Malachi Mataji tells a story that she was cooking for Srila Prabhupada in Mayapur sometime. And, Mayapur in those days was a very austere place to go, to live in. If you go to Mayapur today, then it's like a little embassy of the West in India, in a village in India. We have everything there, all in our campus, in one place. Whatever you need is there. And if you want to live a very Western lifestyle, you can absolutely do that. But in the 1970s, the mid-1970s in Mayapur, it was a very austere place. If you go there, then number one, you're going to get sick. Devotees would go there for a month and they'd spend, 2 weeks out of the 4 being sick, if not more. There was kind of a residences, quarters on the boundary wall. Where there's a row of shops in the campus on the boundary wall, that's where they used to stay. And it was very simple. Mosquitoes everywhere, very, very hot. Getting clean water was very difficult. So living there was very austere, first of all. Second, Malachi Mataji had to go out and shop, buy all the vegetables, and get cheated by the fruit sellers, vegetable sellers, etc. She had to go out, do all the shopping, find the Lakshmi, do all the shopping, come back and cook for Srila Prabhupada. And every day when she'd cook afterwards, Prabhupada would call her and he'd say, "You didn't make this properly. This isn't done properly. Why didn't you do it like this? Haven't you learned how to do things properly?" And so he was correcting. And she felt terrible. I'm doing it wrong. I'm no good. So every day she was thinking, I should just give up this service. Srila Prabhupada is so dissatisfied. I'm not able to do it properly. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? Why am I dissatisfying my spiritual master? I shouldn't be doing this service. So every day she was thinking, I'm going to Go in and tell Srila Prabhupada, muster up the courage. Difficult thing to say, Prabhupada, I don't think I can serve you. You know, very difficult. So every day she'd go in thinking, I'm going to tell him I can't do this service anymore. It's so difficult, it's so taxing, my body, my mind are suffering, and you're not satisfied, Prabhupada. There's no point. No one's happy in this equation. So one day she's in the morning, she was going to go in, pay her obeisances to Srila Prabhupada, beg forgiveness and say, Prabhupada, I can't do this anymore. And then as she walked through the door, Srila Prabhupada said, my godbrothers are coming today. Make a feast. And then she was just gobsmacked. What do I say? She's ready to tell Prabhupada, but she couldn't tell him. So of course, she ran to start preparing a feast for Prabhupada and his godbrothers. And, they were very light on manpower in those early days. There weren't many devotees around. So she was not just cooking, but she had to serve also. So she prepared this feast for everyone. And then eventually all of the godbrothers come. And they sit down. And, they're living in India. Most of them, if not all of them, probably never left India. They're very conservative. Generally, Brahmanas, ideally, they'll cook for themselves. But the idea that a Western person would cook for them in traditional India, this was unheard of. And never mind a Western person, but a Western Mataji. This was the concept. So they all came in, they sat down, and Malati Mataji started giving them the plates and serving them prasad. And they were just looking. And she explains that you could cut the atmosphere like a knife. You could. It was such a thick atmosphere, so hostile. Hostile, you know the word? Hostile. So such an unfriendly atmosphere when she walked in, and you could see that they were just feeling so uncomfortable. Number one, in the presence of a woman, they were sannyasis. So in terms of preaching, if you go to India, even now, women will keep a distance from a sannyasi, from someone in saffron. That's the kind of tradition. And but number one, that there's a woman in their midst. Number two, she had cooked. And number three, she was going to serve them. They felt so uncomfortable. And they were thinking, I don't want to eat here. I don't want to be here. And the only reason they were there was for Srila Prabhupada. And they had some respect for him. They had come to see him. But they were just feeling super uncomfortable. So then prasadam was served. They did the prayers. And, they were kind of looking down at the prasad, looking really uncomfortable. And then Srila Prabhupada said, what's the problem? She's cooking. She's a Vaishnavi. She would do anything for me, and I would do anything for her. And then Prabhupada said, she would cut her throat for me, and I would cut my throat for her. And Malati Mataji heard this. And she, for days, I don't know, weeks maybe, she was feeling so terrible at being an incapable servant. But when she felt that love, Prabhupada, in front of his godbrothers, his conservative godbrothers who were judging him already for having a woman cook for him, for having a Western woman cook for him, and then serve. And then Prabhupada, to their faces, stood up for her. She said, wow, I'm giving my life 1,000,000 times over to this person. She felt so cared for, sheltered, loved. And they all put their heads down and ate. What could they say? So Srila Prabhupada really put himself on the line. So he was so loving. He was so caring. In the early days, very early days, this is a little bit later on, of course, in the mid-70s, but in the very early days, not Yamuna, Janaki Mataji tells a story of how there was initiations going on, and the first Prabhus in ISKCON were receiving Brahmin initiation, second initiation. And again, this was for conservative Indians, the Brahminical class. This was also unheard of. That people who were previously eating cows, eating meat is one thing, and then eating cows is worse in Brahminical culture. These people were then receiving Brahminical initiation. So this was unheard of. Prabhupada was a dynamic preacher, and he was preaching according to time, place, and circumstance. An acharya, only an acharya can make such changes. Because this was, again, it was unheard of. But preaching in the West required a different set of rules. So Prabhupada adjusted things according to the environment in order to push forward the mission. So he was giving initiation to men. And initiation is one thing, Harinam initiation is one thing. Okay, he's giving the holy name, but the holy name is spread far and wide. We do Harinam all over the world, across India. Chanting of the holy names is there. So first initiation is one thing, but to give the Diksha mantras, the Gayatri mantras, to Westerners who had previously been eating meat, cows, this was unheard of. So, but Srila Prabhupada made that step. So this was the first Brahminical initiation in ISKCON. And Janaki Mataji walked in. And there it was, the Prabhus were sitting there, they were about to receive second initiation. And they would all grown together, they'd all come to Prabhupada at similar times, they'd all been serving their hearts out. And then Janaki said to Prabhupada, what about me? What about me? Can't I receive second initiation? What do you think Prabhupada said? Get out of here. No, you're a woman. Who do you think you are? No, of course not. Prabhupada was so touched. Such a simple, humble plea. What about me? So then Prabhupada, he was already putting himself on the line by giving initiation to Western men, second initiation to Western men. But then he went a step further and he gave initiation to Janaki also. And so it was amazing. So Prabhupada was so full of love, so full of compassion, soft as a rose. Soft as a rose. At the same time, Prabhupada could be as strong as a thunderbolt. He could be very strong. There are purports. There's one Chaitanya Charitamrita purport where Prabhupada says that my godbrothers are asar. What is asar? Useless. That's heavy. And he put it in black and white. Because he said that our spiritual master, Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, he had a particular mission. And that mission was to fulfill the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. What was Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's mission? Prithivitiyachiyata Nagaradigram, that in every town and village, and not in every town and village in India, but in every town and village in the world, the holy name will be sung, chanted, with great enthusiasm and gusto. This was the mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, this is what has to happen. But none of Srila Prabhupada's godbrothers believed that it could happen. There was one godbrother. His name was Bhakti Hriday Bon Maharaj. You may have heard of him. And so he came in the 1930s. Srila Prabhupada came in 1965, as we all know. He came in the 1930s in order to preach Krishna consciousness in the West. He went to the UK and he went to Germany. So he was preaching, trying in the UK, doing some programs, etc. And his idea was to meet the influential class. So he met a Lord Zetland. And when Bon Maharaj explained to Lord Zetland what the principles of Krishna consciousness are, no meat eating, no alcohol or intoxication, no gambling, no illicit sex, when he explained the principles, chanting 16 rounds a day, etc., or however many rounds he may have said, then Lord Zetland said, absolutely impossible. So this was his conclusion. So Bon Maharaj, he went to Germany. I think he made 2 or 3 disciples in Germany. But basically, after having toured the West, he returned to India. I think it was 1933. And he went to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, his spiritual master. And his conclusion was that this mission to spread Krishna consciousness across the world, particularly the Western world, wasn't a very realistic proposition. It wasn't going to happen. That was his conclusion. So, of course, after Saraswati Thakur left, he made various remarks which were critical of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur. Anyone who criticizes your spiritual master, have you ever heard criticism? I don't know whether devotees are initiated here, but if anyone, some of you are, of course, but if anyone criticizes your spiritual master, they become your enemy. Strong word. But a disciple doesn't hear criticism of the spiritual master. So this is loyalty, this is gratitude. So Bon Maharaj criticized Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, some of his views and practices. So Prabhupada was with some of his godbrothers, and he said, one of the godbrothers said that Bon Maharaj, what should be done with him? They should get him on an ox cart, tie him to some oxes, and use him as a plough and take him around Vrindavan. Like a plough. You understand? Oh, Krishna Brahma Prabhu, Hare Krishna. Take him. You understand? You envision what's being said here. Take him and tie him to some oxes and take him around Vrindavan. Use him like a plough. That's what should be done with Bon Maharaj, and they're all laughing. So quite strong. Why? Because he was critical of their spiritual master. If someone is critical of your spiritual master, there is no tolerance. So Prabhupada was so loyal and had such faith in his spiritual master. And we're just talking, Prabhu, about how Prabhupada was as soft as a rose. Okay. As strong as a thunderbolt. So he could be very strong. On one occasion, Srila Prabhupada was in LA, and he was training devotees. Particularly, Prabhupada wanted to train leaders so that they could then go on to train others in the future. So at that time, he was training Tamal Krishna Maharaj in particular. So he asked Tamal Krishna Maharaj to bring the first canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam. And you'll see it's a beautiful front cover. What is on the front cover of the first canto? Yes. All the planets. So you see the spiritual world. So some of you may know this story, but I often reflect on this. So then you have, so Srila Prabhupada explained that, yes, the entire creation, there's 3/4 of the entire creation is the spiritual creation, spiritual world. And then 1/4 is material world. So the material world is relatively small in relation to the spiritual world. And within this material world, there are unlimited planets. From Mahavishnu, as he breathes out, unlimited planets are emanated. And then from those universes, there is one universe in particular, where we are. Within that universe, there are unlimited planets, he told Tamal Krishna Maharaj. And amongst those unlimited planets, there is one Earth planet. And on this Earth planet, there are so many continents, 7 continents. And of these 7 continents, there is one, North America. And in this North America, there are so many cities, many cities in North America. And amongst these cities, there is one, Los Angeles. And in this Los Angeles, there are many streets, boulevards, etc. But there is one, La Cienega Boulevard. That's where they were. And on this La Cienega Boulevard, there are many buildings, but there is one Hare Krishna temple. And in this one Hare Krishna temple, there are many devotees. But there is one teeny weeny Tamal. And he thinks he's the controller of everything. So Tamal Krishna Maharaj tells the story himself, and he said when he heard this, Prabhupada made him feel this small. So that was Srila Prabhupada. He was strong also. He could be strong. When he was training his disciples, especially if you're close, then there are many occasions, many stories where devotees explained how Srila Prabhupada was very corrective, very strong in so many situations. So, soft as a rose and as strong as a thunderbolt. Srila Prabhupada was a visionary. You know, there was a... Srila Prabhupada was sitting in Tompkins Square Park, and there was a bus driver or a train driver, and he came along and he was curious. He was talking to Srila Prabhupada, asking him, "Who are you? What are you doing here?" You know, seeing a, saffron-clad monk in New York in 1965-66 was an oddity. So then he asked, what are you doing here? What is your purpose? Why have you come? And Srila Prabhupada explained to him what his mission was. He said, I've come here, it's my first time traveling abroad, traveling to the West, and I've come here to establish this ancient Vedic culture, Krishna consciousness here in America. And he said, there are temples, 108 temples. There are thousands of devotees. There are many books. Just time separates. And at that time, Srila Prabhupada had nothing. At best, he had a handful of followers who were, casually interested in what he was sharing. But he had such faith and such confidence that he had a vision. He had a vision of what he wanted to do. And he knew that it was going to happen. And not because he thought that he was something special. Of course, we know he is. But for him, the way he saw things was that I have the order of my spiritual master in my heart. And of course, that order was given to him in 1922. When he first met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur in 1922, he said, you're young, you're educated, you speak English. Actually, he said it to a group of people. But Srila Prabhupada took that to heart. Sometimes we need the spiritual master or a senior devotee to tell us personally for it to hit home. This was Prabhupada was part of an audience on the Alta Dunga Road Junction. Upstairs, you can go there now. It's been very nicely renovated. We have a building there, which is maintained now by ISKCON. And on the roof there, that was when Prabhupada first met his spiritual master. And he said, you're young, you're educated, you're English speaking. This mission has to go all across the world. Everyone has to hear about Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Everyone has to hear about the holy name. This is essential. And then, of course, Srila Prabhupada was a follower of Mahatma Gandhi at the time. And he was a freedom fighter, freedom from the British Raj. And so Srila Prabhupada's answer, his response then was that until and unless India gets freedom from the British, this cannot happen. And then Saraswati Thakur's, so Prabhupada put his hand up and said that. And then Saraswati Thakur's response was, Prabhupada said it was thunderous. It was like a roaring lion. He said, there is nothing that can stop. There is no material obstacle which can stop this mission of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. There is no material impediment that can stop this mission. So that was Srila Prabhupada's faith. That was Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur's faith. So Srila Prabhupada, he said he felt the purity. He didn't want to go to meet this guru or this sadhu because he had lost faith in these people in his youth. But he said he felt the purity in this person. So Srila Prabhupada took that mood, and he knew that being empowered by his spiritual master, because he was purely trying to follow the will and the desire of his spiritual master, everything would come, everything would happen. So Srila Prabhupada was a real visionary. He had such faith. He named his society the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And this was again at a time, 1966, the incorporation of ISKCON. This was again at a time when he had very little, just a handful of followers. But Srila Prabhupada, he said, I don't know how to think small. He was always thinking big. And that's the basis upon which he then inspired, empowered his disciples to create such a sprawling society with so many wonderful projects and kind of activities going on. So Prabhupada was very thinking big, with a huge vision. At the same time, he was also very detail-oriented, very particular in how things should be done. So he would take lunch. There's a picture. I used to live. I'm from London, as I think most of you know. I lived in Bhaktivedanta Manor for. I went there many times in my youth, and I lived there for almost 10 years. And there's Prabhupada's rooms, Bhaktivedanta Manor. I'm sure some of you have been there. And there's the bay window. And there's a picture where Prabhupada every day he would face Shri Shri Jagnabaldev Subhadramai ki, Shri Shri Gaurnitai ki jai. He would face the window and take prasad. And he wasn't a fast eater. 45 minutes he would take on average to take prasad. Very slow, very meditative, very deliberate, and he would do so facing the window. So with his back, so the door's here, the window's here, so he would do so with his back to the door. So if someone would come in, they'd see his back. So very private, very quiet. He had a very elaborate, is it Giriraj Maharaj who tells this story? He had a very elaborate key system. So he had a key on his Brahman thread, and that would open one lock, and you open that. Tamar Krishna Maharaj tells this story. That's it. That opened one, and then in there, hidden away, was another key, and that would open another lock, and then in there would be another key, and that would open the safe. So things were very elaborate. He had a system for everything. When he was starting his mission, in Prabhupada's diaries, you see that he would, every expense, he would note it down. 20 cents, this, 35 cents, this, $1.20, this, He was very, very detail-oriented. It makes me think of Prabhupada's first visit to the supermarket in America. So he went to the supermarket, and it was a very novel experience, because in India, you kind of have these, if you've been to India, then they have these kind of street traders who have their kind of little stall that they roll around, and that's where you buy your fruit and veg. But Prabhupada, there was a supermarket, and he goes in, and then you get a trolley, and you kind of put everything you want into your basket, and then you go to the checkout. So then the lady, she weighs everything up, she prices it all up, gives the total, and whatever it was, $4.70, sir. What do you do when you're in India? If someone gives you a price, what do? You're going to bargain. In India, you have to bargain. You don't have any sales interaction where you do not bargain. It's just the norm. So then, she says $4.70, and then Prabhupada says, how about $2? So then she says, sorry, sir, $4.70. Prabhupada said, okay, $2.50. And then she explained, there's no bargaining here. So then Prabhupada reluctantly gave $4.70. So the numbers are probably not right, but the story's from a verified source. So, Prabhupada was detail-oriented, and he was a founder of an international society with thousands of devotees. So, such a... And I mean, also one important thing that this story makes me reflect on in particular is just how foreign this land was, or, the West. And going to this new place without anything, it's unimaginable, really. So he arrived in the West. He arrived in Boston, first of all. That was his first vision of American soil. He saw the people, and he looked around and he said, these people are covered so strongly by the modes of passion and ignorance. How will I ever penetrate their hearts? How will I access their hearts and really give them the message that I've come to give? Because what I'm giving, what I have in my heart to give to them. And this is preaching. Preaching means to transfer what is in your heart into the heart of another. Ultimately, that's what preaching is about. And we can present it in so many ways, but ultimately, we have to be cultivating Krishna consciousness in order to be able to effectively give it to another, because there's many layers to an interaction with another person. There's the words we say, there's the non-verbal, sort of the body language, the eye contact, etc., etc. There's those physical things, there's the more subtle elements of the interaction, but ultimately there's a heart-to-heart interaction. And according to the purity and the clarity in our hearts, to that degree we can penetrate another. So Srila Prabhupada had a very pure message. And, this was, he was so deeply absorbed in this. But he was concerned, how will I ever transfer what is in my heart to their heart? It's just so foreign. And therefore he prayed. He prayed as a beggar to Krishna. And he wrote this beautiful poem, Markine Bhagavad Dharam, preaching Krishna consciousness in the West. And he's basically saying, my favorite line in that poem is that, I'm a puppet. Krishna, I'm a puppet in your hands. So Lord, make me dance, oh Lord, make me dance. That's Srila Prabhupada's prayer to Krishna. So Prabhupada was an acharya, he was a trailblazer, he was an innovator, he was a visionary, and at the same time he was a helpless puppet in Krishna's hands. He was very detail-oriented and very personal. So understanding Srila Prabhupada, this is what I was reflecting on, and I've given a few examples. Soft as a rose, strong as a thunderbolt. He was a visionary, at the same time very detail-oriented, very particular on how things should be done. There are so many facets to Srila Prabhupada, and you hear, there are so many books. We have a wealth of books on Srila Prabhupada, his life and times, various devotees' experiences of Srila Prabhupada. And then we have Prabhupada's books, we have Prabhupada's lectures. We have so many sources and ways to know Prabhupada, and it is our duty as Prabhupada Nugas to Shishi Jagnapalli Subhadramai ki, Shishi Gaunitai ki, Jai. So it is our duty to try to understand Srila Prabhupada. Ultimately, a Vaishnava, especially a Vaishnava like Srila Prabhupada, is unlimitedly deep. Once devotees saw a picture of Srila Prabhupada, and he's looking very sober, very somber, very serious. And they showed the picture to Srila Prabhupada. They asked Srila Prabhupada, Prabhupada, what was happening here? You look kind of upset. You don't look very happy. So Srila Prabhupada saw this picture, and he said, in this picture, I was in my greatest ecstasy. So understanding, Vaishnavera Kriya Mudra Vigyayana Bujaya. You can't understand a Vaishnava, you can't understand his activities, you can't understand his moods. It just reminds me, Gaur Govinda Maharaj, 1978 or 79, he was so sick, seemingly. So doctors came to see him, and everyone had a different theory, a different idea about what was wrong. Someone was suggesting this medicine, someone was suggesting that medicine. Everyone was really worried, what's wrong? And then Kinshana Krishnadas Babaji Maharaj came, and he said, sick? He's not sick. He's suffering from bhava. He's got bhava. He's in ecstasy. And these are the symptoms. So very difficult to understand a Vaishnava. But we must try. We must try. It is our duty to really try and understand Srila Prabhupada. And we can do that. We can do that by sincerely reading and studying his books, number one, hearing about him, meditating on him, praying to him. And as we do that, not only by the material process of studying and so on, hearing, but by Prabhupada's mercy, we will be able to imbibe his mood. And then the more our understanding increases, we have a responsibility. We have a responsibility to follow. So, I think it was Sureshwar Prabhu. He was doing Prabhupada disciples, Sureshwar Prabhu. Some of you will have heard of him or know him. I don't know if he's visited here in Zurich ever. Many years ago, I remember many years ago, he was doing a presentation called Srila Prabhupada, the Fading Acharya. So there's Prabhupada, the founder Acharya. His presentation was Prabhupada, the Fading Acharya, and his worry. He was, warning the devotees that there's Srila Prabhupada himself, then there's his direct disciples who had a lot of association with him, and then there's the next generation of devotees, say those who came in the late 70s and 80s, who were still experiencing this wave of Krishna consciousness, which was created by Srila Prabhupada. And then there are the further generations of devotees. How much are they able, or have they been able, to really imbibe Srila Prabhupada's mood? How much have we really been able to understand who Srila Prabhupada is, what he wants? How do we apply Srila Prabhupada's mood and instructions in our lives today, here and now? And it's something which really requires regular reflection. If Srila Prabhupada observed my life, and I think this about, I live in Budapest, and I think this often about our temple, if Srila Prabhupada walked in right now, what would he say? How would he feel? How would he think? My spiritual master is His Holiness Shivaram Swami, so he goes away for 6 months, these days to Mayapur, and when he comes back, then, he looks around, and within 5 minutes he'll tell us then 10 things which we're doing wrong. And it's just like a wake-up call. Because you can live in a place and you just kind of get used to how things are, and you kind of go on with life. And then the spiritual master, who's a representative of Srila Prabhupada, who's a representative of Saraswati Thakur, who's a representative ultimately of Krishna, comes in and says, hey, you're doing this wrong. Correct it. So Prabhupada consciousness, to be a Prabhupada Anuga, one aspect of it means to really imbibe his mood, to really understand what he wanted, and to sincerely try to follow his instructions in our life. And so today is a day when we can really reflect on the quality of our following, quality of our understanding of Srila Prabhupada, and the quality of our following of his mood, his order, his instructions. It's a renewal of our followership, rededication to his mood, to his mission, sharing Krishna consciousness with others, was of course something which Srila Prabhupada was very eager to do, and he inspired and pushed his devotees to really push that mission forward. But at the same time, we shouldn't forget the internal mission. So Prabhupada would expect us to be balanced. Both are very, very important. So what is Srila Prabhupada saying in this purport? There is no difference between the Archa Vigraha and the original person, and therefore those who are engaged in worshipping the deity in the temple in full opulence should be understood to be directly in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead without a doubt. That's some inspiration for Shikshashtakam Prabhu on the altar there. So, and everyone else too. So Prabhupada's purpose was for all of us to become directly in touch with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So, what is the heart of Srila Prabhupada's mission? Ultimately, he wants us all to become pure devotees. And in the midst of everything else that we do in our day-to-day lives, in the midst of the mission of Krishna consciousness, in the midst of, the personal interactions and the, issues and the inspiration, we have to become pure devotees. And that's what Srila Prabhupada came ultimately to give us. So Rupa Goswami talks about how there is the Cheshta Rup. So bhakti can be split into two. There's Cheshta Rupa Bhakti and there's Bhava Rupa Bhakti. So Cheshta means the activities. What am I doing? So we're doing so many things. My plan today is to go out to distribute books. I thought it was a good day to do it because it's Srila Prabhupada's disappearance day. So I'm going to be doing something. So I'm going to pack the bag, pack the trolley, get on the train, go to wherever I go and stop people and try and inspire them to take some books. So that's the activity, the Cheshta Rup. And that's very important, of course. We're not meant to be couch potatoes sitting at home all day or, sitting and doing nothing all day. But at the same time, there is the Bhava Rupa Bhakti. Bhava Rupa Bhakti means the mood, the heart. What is a mood with which we do the activity in? So you could be cleaning the floor. So you could be cleaning the floor just because you've been told to do it and you want to get it done as soon as possible so then you can go back upstairs and sleep. That's mode of ignorance. Devotional service in the mode of ignorance. You can do it in the mode of passion. Okay, I'm going to clean the floor, and then, my service authority is going to come and say, what a wonderful devotee I am, and he's going to announce it tomorrow morning, and everyone's going to realize how amazing I am. That's devotional service in the mode of passion. And then there's devotional service in the mode of goodness. I want to do a good job. I want this place to be nice and clean and prim and proper. This is how things should be done. It's nice, better than the first two. It's the mode of goodness. And then superior to that is that I want to clean this place because this is Gaurnitai Jagannath Baldev Subhadramai's home. They deserve a clean place. They want a clean place. I want to satisfy them. I want to please them. It should be beautiful. And when someone walks into this place, when someone walks into this temple, they should think, wow, this place is amazing. This place is so attractive. And if they're in the modes of passion or ignorance, then they should feel elevated. They should feel relieved of those modes. They should feel elevated to goodness, to pure goodness, to be inspired, to be Krishna conscious. And that's why I'm doing the service. So there is a consciousness behind whatever we do. And that consciousness alone governs the mode within which our service stands. Simply what we're thinking makes such a difference. So bhava rupa bhakti is very, very important. What does Krishna say? Patram pushpam phalam toyam yome bhakta prayachati tadaham bhakti uparitam ashnami prayatatmanaha. What is Krishna looking for? He has everything. He's the cause of all causes. Janmadhyasya yaton vayad taras charteshu bhigyasra. He's the source of everything, including the shirt on our back, we say in English. We should be grateful to Krishna for the shirt on our back. Everything we have is coming from him. He doesn't need anything. Just one thing he's looking for, and that is bhakti. Yome bhaktya prayachati. He accepts something which is offered with even just a little bit of love. So that's Krishna's purpose, and that should therefore also be our fundamental purpose. Yes, I'm doing a lot of things, but it should not just be on the platform of doing Jeshtarup Bhakti. It has to go deeper. There has to be a bhava. And with this context, bhava doesn't mean ecstatic devotion necessarily. Of course, that's the ideal, and that's the goal of our sadhana. Kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhava sadhanabhita. The goal of our sadhana, our chanting and hearing, is bhava. So Rupa Goswami is also visionary. This is from Bhakti-rasamrita Sindhu. He's also visionary. He's saying the goal of whatever we're doing now is that I attain to ecstatic devotion. That's why I'm doing it. And of course, there's many steps in between, and various acharyas comment on those. But the goal is that, I want to become a pure devotee. So that our service and our activities have to be imbued with that desire and with that mood. I want to please and satisfy my authorities. I want to please and satisfy my spiritual master. I want to please and satisfy Srila Prabhupada and their lordships. Shishi Gaurnitai ki, Shishi Jagannath Baldev Subhadramai ki. I was just going to say Shishi Gaurnitai Vijay Gauranga ki jai, but back at home. So that is, let us pray to Srila Prabhupada to empower us, to inspire us. Let us reflect on what we've received from Srila Prabhupada. Cheptak Maharaj writes this beautiful song, Jadi Prabhupada na hoito, tabe ki hoito, ye jivana kahika kiche. What would happen to me? Where would I be if Srila Prabhupada didn't come? Where would I be? And that's also a very good reflection, something to think about regularly. Where would my life be? I probably know what I'd be doing approximately, but what would be the meaning or the value of that life? What would be the substance of it? What kind of a life would it be? So inculcating this kind of gratitude and recommitment to serving and pleasing and dedicating ourselves more and more to His divine grace and His amazing, unsurpassable mission of Krishna consciousness. I'm going to stop there and see if there's any comments, corrections. Krishna Prem Rupa, would you like to say something?
Thank you very much. Nice thoughts and reflections. Just one question. You mentioned earlier that Bol Maharaj went to UK and also to Germany. He made 3 disciples. Did he connect them to Bhaktivedanta or did he accept them himself?
My understanding is that he initiated them himself, but that would probably require some verification.
Just in terms of
Yeah, sure. Presence, initiating in the presence of one spiritual master. Yeah, that's. Yeah. It's quite possible he connected them to Saraswati Thakur, but actually, it needs to be looked at. Yeah, I've read it somewhere. I've read the answer, but it's there somewhere. So, yes. Anyone else? Yes, Machi. Hare Krishna.
So much for your very powerful lecture. When you were telling that actually if you're hearing someone's criticizing your spiritual master, you should take this person as enemy. Yeah, I mean, I was just reminded of one occasion where a person who I actually really respect and I know this person must be a pure devotee, and he told things that I was like quite shocked at.
About your spiritual master?
Okay, yeah. So I wasn't sure how to react when I saw a person. It's like you should be open to listen about things, but also you should really protect yourself. How can you develop this enemy in someone who is actually so wrong?
I think generally speaking, do I need to repeat the question for the? I should, right, for the camera. So the question is that I mentioned how if someone criticizes you as a spiritual master, then you should take them as an enemy. Strong words. So Mataji's question is that she was in the situation where someone who she sees as a spiritual master was being criticized by someone else who she sees as very advanced, a pure devotee. So then what to do? Should she... I'm suggesting that she should see that person as an enemy. Is that right? How does that work? Correct? Good. Okay, so should I qualify my statement? Maybe yes, maybe no. I think there has to be... there's nuances to it, of course. Maybe not enemy. But generally speaking, if you hold someone in high esteem as a spiritual master or a future spiritual master, etc., then a person who is preaching to you should respect that. And unless they have a grave concern about the person, either their character, their lifestyle, etc., their position or their standing, then their opinions or their comments should be kept private, and they should look not to damage the faith of a disciple or potential disciple. So that's etiquette. And to speak ill of someone, we should avoid. So then if someone is doing that and they're criticizing your spiritual master or spiritual master to be, then what would be the best response? Okay, so maybe I don't want to cultivate enmity towards someone, of course. So that's my qualification for my statement. But respect from a distance. Respect from a distance. And I respect all Vaishnavas. And, if we see a Mayavadi sannyasi, Prabhupada is so strong against Mayavadis. Purple after purple after purple. But still we're instructed, if we see a Mayavadi sannyasi, we pay our obeisances. We don't associate with them. We don't hear from them. It's like poison, like the lips of a serpent touching milk. We don't drink that milk. But Avaishnava Mukhud Girnam Bhutam Harikathamritam, that is lips. So it's not to be heard, but we still pay obeisances, we still respect from a distance. I don't want to cultivate enmity, that blackens my own heart. I don't reflect on it. Shastra says that if someone criticizes, someone offends a Vaishnav, if you're a spiritual master, then especially so, then there's 3 routes, 3 solutions. Number 1, that was his first response. I was going to say, let's build up, So the first is to defeat them in argument. Yeah. The second is leave the place. Third is to cut their tongue out or kill them. So that's the response. But then if that person themselves is a Vaishnava and a great Vaishnava, then okay, maybe I choose a second option. But I probably can't defeat them, and I probably don't want to get into that, because then it becomes quite messy. And I probably don't want to cut their tongue out, not in this society. So then I'll leave that place and pay respects from a distance. One has to protect one's faith. Faith in the spiritual master is the most valuable commodity in Krishna consciousness. Such a valuable commodity. And through that, so much comes. And devotees who are advised otherwise are being strangled. Spiritually strangled. In many places, I was a Bhaktivedanta Manor for many years, as I mentioned. Not many years, some years. And there were 2 gurus who left. And the community is still... There were some devotees in the community, old devotees, who were affected by that. And that remains in the institutional psyche. So when those devotees give class, it comes across. And I'm not at all criticizing them, but it's natural. If you've been cheated, if you feel cheated, then it comes across. And then younger devotees will hear that, and then that becomes their faith. That becomes their understanding. But then we read Prabhupada. We hear Prabhupada, and we see Prabhupada's example. Prabhupada said, what was the basis of his success? It was his single-pointed, absolute, unflinching faith in the order of his spiritual master. That was the active principle of his success. That pure faith is such a beautiful, pristine thing. And again, it's the most valuable commodity of any devotee. So, and it's possible. And we should look to build that kind of faith, because through that we will gain such mercy and empowerment. And that's our process. That's our process. Surrender to a spiritual master. Rupa Goswami gives us 64 limbs. The first 3. Surrender to a spiritual master, serve him, take spiritual initiation. That's the crux, the root of devotional service. And everything else comes from there. Is that okay, Machi? Okay, time is running. Thank you so much for your kind attention. I wish everyone a wonderful, Krishna conscious, Prabhupada conscious day. And I beg everyone's blessings that we can go out. I think devotees here are also going out. And Ebejash Gushuk Tribhuvana, making Prabhupada famous all across the three worlds. So Zurich is a city where people come from all over the world, and in this way, everyone can hear about Prabhupada and his pristine, pure message of Krishna consciousness. Granth Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Shri Shri Gaunitai ki, Shri Shri Jagannath Baldev Subhadramai ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Srila Prabhupada Tirubhav Mahamotsav ki, Nittai Gaur Premanandi, Gaur Bhakta Brinda ki,